All right, Immanuel Kant. We are beginning. Introduction to Immanuel Kant. And by the way, this is going to be our first actual substantial philosopher. From Kant on, it's starting to be a little more substantial, a little more difficult to follow, right? I gave you some appetizers there with the Song of Songs, with Plato and Rumi. Now it's going to go a little uphill. I'm just warning you, right? Now it's going to be a little more tedious to read, but still very, very interesting, right? All the texts for this class are interesting, fascinating, but a little more difficult to read. So let me introduce you to this new philosopher, Immanuel Kant. So again, we're traveling, remember, in space and time. So we were over there in the Persian Empire, right, in present-day Turkey with Rumi. And now we're entering different era. We're entering modernity, right? We're leaving behind medieval times. We're entering the modern era, and we are in Germany. And the time is the 18th century. Okay, so we moved like 4 centuries, 4, 5, 6. I forgot when Rumi was born. And we are also moving in space. We're entering modernity, Western Europe, and it's a completely different atmosphere. Okay, so first we're going to talk about modernity, the modern era. Then we're going to talk about Kant's bio, which there's not much, honestly. And then finally, we'll finish with his philosophy. Good, that's the plan for today. Okay, so a few words on the modern era. There is a big shift that occurs between medieval times that we were studying with Rumi and modernity that we are entering now with Kant. And the main shift has to do with moving away from religion. Okay, so this is really the main shift that occurs, the main difference that occurs between the Middle Ages, where Rumi was, and where Kant is now in modernity, is the shift from the religious mindset to a secular mindset. Okay, so that's where we are. And there's certain reasons why this shift is taking place. Does anybody know what these are? There are 2 main reasons that I know of that cause this kind of, moving away from religion, becoming more secular, atheistic minded. Anybody know? What are the 2 reasons? Okay, Hassan, explain what you mean by the age of enlightenment.
During the 17th and 18th centuries, we have the age of enlightenment, enlightened thinkers who are influenced by the Renaissance, but take it to another level of understanding and try to break things down in terms of philosophy as if it was like a science project.
Good, right? So we have something you're mentioning in your answers. We have the rise of the scientific worldview, right? Science is on the rise. And with it, you have kind of the demise of religion. Why? Because with science, we realize we can solve problems without the help of God, right? So the first reason of the shift from religious to secular is the rise of science, right? Because with science, we realize, right, I can solve this problem on my own. I don't need to pray. I don't need to have a procession through the city, right? Imagine there's a drought in the land. Well, with proper use of your mind, you can devise an interesting irrigation system. You can find a way to store rainwater. You have options that you can come up with. If you don't have your mind, of course, you need God to bring this to you. And so you pray, you do rain dance, you do procession, right? Through the city, carrying some, icon. Right? And so people are realizing more and more, we don't need to rely on the church anymore. We can, through the proper use of our mind, devise the technology, make the scientific discoveries, the medical discoveries that we need to thrive as a human race. We don't need God anymore, right? That's the first reason. Second reason has to do, so the first one, let me write it down, right again, with a number, rise of science. Second reason why there is a shift from the religious to the secular is tiredness with the violence of the church, right? And what I mean here, of course, is the church in Europe, not the church in America yet, right? So in Europe, you had centuries of the church persecuting whoever it didn't think fit into their ideal of humanity. You had the church sending the crusades, you had religious wars. So you had centuries of oppression, right, by the church, which made people weary and tired. And little by little, they realized, like, we don't, not only we don't need this, but we don't want this anymore, right? So this is really the twin reasons, right, why people started to move away from the church. They were tired of the violence, the persecutions, the Inquisition, and they also were realizing that actually we don't need you anyways, right? We can figure this out by ourselves, right? Okay. So, so that's where we are, right? When Kant arrives on the scene, we are in a time which is much more secular. And so even though we're going to see that Kant's background is religious, Christian, he's still going to be talking a very secular language, right? Even though you can sense sometimes some inspiration by Christianity, he's still talking like a rationalist, like a philosopher to a secular audience, right? Okay. So another thing, another aspect of modernity has to do with the idea of progress, right? Connected with the rise of science, with the fact that, we can solve our problems, we can defeat the plague, we can defeat drought, we can defeat this and that with just by being intelligent, right? There was at the same time this idea that, well, more and more we are going to progress, right? We're going to become more and more evolved as a species, more and more happy. And some philosophers added, perhaps even we can progress morally. And this is the key. This is where Kant comes in, right? So just like there was science thinking we can solve all of the problems, right, that we have in nature, moral philosophers started to think, maybe we can also solve the problems of human nature. Maybe we can also learn to become better people, to become more moral, more civilized as a human race, right? So we'll talk about this in a second, right? And how Kant fits in that category, right? But for now, just remind yourselves the idea of progress. There was also, so let me write this down, right? And there was a very powerful optimism that we were headed in the right direction as a civilization, right? Of course, the 20th century, all of these beautiful ideas of progress came crashing down with the 2 world wars. But at the time, there was still the idea that we were on an upward curve, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about these philosophers who thought that, okay, we can dominate nature with science. Maybe we can also dominate human nature and make it manageable with philosophy, right? And one of these philosophers who thought that we can become better morally with proper use of our mind was Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes. Okay, I've been writing to this private person. Sorry, I'm writing everything else that I said before. Idea of progress, right? Optimism. And now we're going to Hobbes. So I want to talk a little bit about Hobbes because he is the one that Kant is going to respond to. And so we need to know a little bit. So if you're familiar with Hobbes, he has written a book called The Leviathan, which basically means big whale. Okay, that's what it means. I'm serious. Leviathan is a big sea monster. It's a biblical term and basically means big whale. Okay, so he wrote this book about this big whale, which for him represented the state or the social contract. And so we won't go into that, but I'm going to zoom in on his moral philosophy in this very thick book. So let's talk a little bit about that, right? So Hobbes believed that we can progress morally, just like we can progress technologically. Okay, make sure you write this down. Let me say it again. Hobbes believed that we could progress morally as human beings, just like we could progress technologically and scientifically, right, as rational beings. So he actually decided we need to become, right, we can become more moral. And so his technique was going to be very different from the medieval times. So let's look a little bit at morality in medieval times. Those of you who were churchgoers, you will know this very well, because medieval morality is the morality of the church. So according to the church, who decides what is right and wrong? And what happens if you do something wrong? Anybody know? All of my Hassan, What are you saying, Hassan? Oh, the Pope, yes. And now what happens if you do something wrong?
Excommunication.
Okay, worse than that. If you're a lifetime sinner, what's going to happen to you? Yes, thank you, Leon, right? You're gonna go to hell, right? So medieval morality is morality which is there to scare you into being a good person, right? So first of all, two things with the church. The church decides what is right and wrong, and then there is this kind of pressure, right? Coercion. If you don't do right, they scare you into being moral, right? This is the type of medieval stuff that was going on. So people are moral not because they want to, not because they've become better people. They're still wretched, they're still immoral sinners, but at least they're so scared of hell, they're gonna, on the surface, make changes, right? Hobbes is looking at this. Okay, so make sure you write this down, right? So the medieval morality, let me write it down, is fear-based. There's no real transformation, right? Everybody remains a terrible sinner, right? But at least they know how to behave, right, in a way that will get them to heaven, hopefully, right? So Hobbes, of course, being enlightened, being part of modernity, is like, we need to mature a little bit. We need to grow up. And so he conceived the idea, and this is pretty interesting. He conceived the idea of seducing people into becoming moral, not scaring them, but making them want to do it. Kind of like the donkey with the carrot, like that, right? So here's what he said. Here's his argument. I'm going to do it with you right now. So he's talking to everyone, and he's saying, well, let's imagine a society where there is no morality. What would it look like, and would you be happy there? What do you think? What would it look like, and would you be happy in such a world where there is no laws, no principles, no moral right and wrong? What would it look like? Medina, go ahead.
It would be more like, it would be very chaotic, and people would be just doing whatever they want.
Excellent, right? And would you be happy in such a chaotic world?
No.
Okay, exactly, right? In such a world where anyone can do what they want, they can kill you, they can butcher you. Now you can kill too, but then you'll be killed, right? So he's saying, see, don't you want to be moral, right? And so he's saying, don't you see, this is the main argument, don't you see that it is in your interest to be moral? And so people listen to this and they're like, yeah, I want to be moral. This is one step beyond, right? We are now a little further than the church, which was everybody was horrible people and acting out of fear. Now people are like, I want to be good because this will make me happy, right? And so let me summarize a little bit the steps of his argument, because Kant is going to actually take issue with it. So for Hobbes, right, he actually, there are three parts, right, to his argument. Number one, he has the starting point of saying that left to our own devices, we are impossible. We are terribly immoral, right? Devices. He says it like this: man is a wolf for man, right? That's the starting point. Left to our own devices, if there's no law, if there's no morality, if there's no government, we are a wolf to each other. We will devour each other, right? That's his starting point. So then he says, therefore, let's be moral in order, right, to create a stable society, right, where no one is afraid, right, where we have cooperation, etc., right? And so in that context, number three, actually, let me add one thing. So here the morality is kind of a role we play, right? Let me develop that in a second. Let me say more. Okay, so that's the second step, right? Let's be moral so that we'll have a good society, we'll be happy, and we'll cooperate. Now, here's my question to you. Are we truly moral, or is there something missing what's the problem with this argument? Let me ask it like that, right? What would be missing in this view that we should be moral in order to create a nice society and to be happy? So now you're still a wolf, right? But now you're opening the door, you're paying your taxes, you're being nice, right? You're not taking what you want because then you're in trouble. So what is missing here in what Hobbes is talking about? Let's see. So yeah, we know what's right and wrong. The government tells us what's right and wrong. Whatever decreases our happiness as a society is wrong. That's how we know, right? Whatever increases our happiness as a society is right. So we do have clear guidelines, right? That the government establishes, the state, the social contract, so that to maximize our happiness. So what makes us all happy is good, what makes us all unhappy is bad. So we're pretty clear on what's right and wrong. But what's the issue here with this type of moral philosophy? Are you completely comfortable with this idea of being moral for the sake of being happy? Thank you, Leventhal. Go ahead, explain yourself.
Just that if people are just doing things to get along, then they're not like, they don't believe in what they're doing. They're just doing it because that's what makes them look good and they fit in that way, but they're not sincere with their actions.
Excellent. That's exactly the problem, right? We still are wolves, but we're wolves dressed in tuxedos. We're wolves wearing high heels. We're wolves, doing everything right. But deep down, we just want, we just want to be happy. We don't care, deeply about anybody else, right? So this is the issue here with number 2, right? I'm still adding to it. This type of morality is a bit unnatural. The wolf remains a wolf, right? He's just pasting a civilized smile on his face, right? The wolf remains a wolf. He's just acting nice, right? Like a nice guy, but he's still a wolf. Like the movie. Have you seen this movie? A long time ago with Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino, The Devil's Advocate. Let me see. How many of you saw this terrible movie? How many of you? Nobody? Okay, well, that's all right. There was there's a moment in the movie where he's a lawyer and he realizes everyone around him is a wolf in disguise. And it kind of shows that in the movie. So it's the idea, right? We are all wolves in disguise. So morality doesn't go deep, doesn't really transform. We're just acting nice so that we can have a stable society so that ultimately we can be happy, right? So ultimately, and this is point 3 with Hobbes, right? Morality is there to help us be happy. That's the goal, right? Okay, any questions on Hobbes? You need to understand Hobbes to understand Kant. So is everybody with me with Hobbes? Any questions on Hobbes? Okay, we have a couple questions. Let's see. Leon and then Halmurad.
I just had a quick question. So is he trying to say like you have to prioritize society's need over your own?
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever it is that you believe in, it doesn't matter because like you're prioritizing everybody else's happiness over yours. Is that what he's trying to say?
Yeah, because ultimately everybody else's happiness includes your happiness, right?
So if everybody else is happy, you're happy. Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah. Because if you have a stable society, then you're going to be happy. But you're right. There's a problem also with the fact that you have to kind of merge your interests with everybody else's interests. This is the social contract, right? You have and you see how many different governments do it. Some of them have a hardcore social contract. You completely merge your interests for the interest of the collectivity. You have this Russia, China, and then you have a kind of mixed here in the States where it's like, yeah, we merge, but there's still a few things that don't merge, right? We have different variations of the social contract throughout the world, right? But the idea is, I'm going to be moral so that, of course, we can all be happy, which ultimately benefits me.
Okay.
Right? Good. Halmurad, go ahead.
Oh, you actually answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, good. And Rahman, what do you mean, Rahman? Tell me. Rahman, are you there? Okay. So I'll try to answer what you said in the chat. So yes, the happiness of everyone, right, ultimately benefits you because everyone is cooperating, everyone is peaceful, right? So therefore you're peaceful, right? You don't have crime, you don't have danger, you can walk in the streets, you're fine because everybody's fine. That's the idea. Okay, now, so hedonism is okay as long, of course, Hassan, it doesn't bother anybody else. So if your hedonism is playing loud music till 2 o'clock in the morning, no, right? You can have hedonism as long as it concerns you and doesn't affect anyone else's happiness, right? Because the general rule, the morality there is whatever benefits everybody is the right. Whatever doesn't benefit the group is wrong. Right? So you can have totally private hedonism, no problem. I would think with Hobbes. Okay, so now let's go to Kant, right? So Kant is actually going to make exactly some of your criticisms, right? I think what Löwenthal was saying, that Hobbes' morality is not sincere, the people are still wolves, Kant is going to disagree, right? He's going to actually have a very different starting point than Hobbes. So let me summarize, and then we'll go 1, 2, 3. Like I did with Hobbes, and then you have your chart, right? Okay. So first of all, Kant is going to disagree with Hobbes that we are wolves to each other, right? He's going to say, no, part of us, yes, is wolf-like, but part of us is also genuinely altruistic, generous, compassionate, right? So he says we are mixed. We're mixed between selfish, wolf-like inclination, but we also have a good side. Sometimes naturally we want to help others, not about us. Sometimes naturally we want to be generous and we want to be good, right? So he's saying we're kind of a mixture of the two. And then, so he's going to add and say, well, we have two actually forces working within us, not just one wolf force. We have two forces. And he's going to call these two forces instinct and reason. So instinct is the force of the wolf, right? The part of us which is selfish and wants immediate gratification. That's the instinct. That's the wolf part. But then he says we have something else too called reason. Reason is the force of the good in us, right? Is the part of us which wants to be good, help others, etc., right? And he's saying we are actually a blend of these two. And so so that's the first point, right? That was point 1 in response to Hobbes, right? So in response to Hobbes, who says we are wolves, without morality, it would be chaos. Kant says, no, we are not only wolves. Part of us is good, right? So let me write this down. We're not only wolves, right? Part of us is good, right? So then we get to point 2, where Hobbes was saying, so let's be moral so we can be happy, right? But deep down, you're still a wolf. Kant is going to say, no, morality in many ways, first of all, is not dictated by the state. He says morality is in you, right? That's the second point, right? Let me say it again, then I'll write it down, right? Whereas Hobbes was saying morality is dictated by the state. What's good for the group is good. What's bad for the group is bad. Kant says, no one can dictate to you morality, because deep down in yourself, you know already what is right and what is wrong. And we can all relate to this, right? If you're about to do something wrong, you can feel that you're about to do something wrong, right? Put your hand in the screen, hopefully. How many of you were about to do something and you're like, you sense it, but you still do it, right? Because you rationalize your way, right? But most of us, or all of us, according to Kant, actually have this voice within us, which is telling us this is right, this is wrong. We know. We don't need the state to dictate. And so for Kant, and this is point 2, right? Morality is natural to a certain degree. It is within us. It cannot be dictated by something outside, right? By external world, like the state, for example. right? So Kant actually would be for things like civil disobedience, right? He would be for this notion that I feel this is wrong, so I'm going to go against the rules of the state because I feel this is wrong, right? So any type of boycott or, you know, things that are unlawful that, for example, the civil rights movement did because they sensed something was deeply wrong, Kant would be like, that's cool, right? Because morality, what is right and what is wrong, cannot be dictated by anyone but yourself. You yourself have it in you to judge between good and evil. You don't need scripture and you don't need the state. You know already. Let me say that again. You don't need scripture. You don't need a priest telling you what to do. You don't need the state telling you what to do or the government. You know already because it's written in your heart. You know this. And this is what Kant calls reason, right? Reason, in a way, you can summarize it as the voice of your conscience, right? This is kind of, right? Don't mix up reason with like your brain, okay? That Kant actually calls that understanding. What your brain is doing, like 1 + 1 = 2, or what's the structure of the atom, right? This is understanding. Reason is basically what Kant understands as the voice of conscience. Anytime you hear that voice saying, don't do it, don't do that, don't do this, right? You are hearing the voice of what Kant calls reason. Okay, so don't mix up reason with like brain work, right? Don't mix reason up with like brain power. Okay, it's not something intellectual. Hassan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just don't see the logic within Kant's argument. I personally think that Hobbes makes a lot more sense, and not because he has the same birthday as me, but because the overall philosophy that you cannot base everything on morality and religion. There has to be the state has to take control in some sorts, because when it comes to, oh, you have that within you that makes you that inward morality that determines your actions, that's not true majority of the times. If someone gets $1 billion the next day, the good thing to do, the right thing to do, is, you know, save a whole bunch of people from starving to death, maybe go stop some wars, build some schools, build some hospitals, since you have the money. And you don't need all that money, but in reality, you're not gonna, most people like when it comes back to hedonism, like if it makes me feel good to not care about others, I'm going to do it. Most people don't really care for others, and it might not be the best moral thing. It all comes down to your own standards, I guess.
Yeah, so Kant would agree with you, right? But where he would disagree is that we still have it, but he agrees with you that this voice of reason is very small in many people. We barely hear it, right? The voice of instinct is much bigger. So you receive $1 million, you have a fleeting thought that maybe you should do something positive with it, and that very powerful urge to do what you want with it, right? So this is why Kant is writing this book, because he's trying, remember, Kant is trying to develop humanity. So what he's doing with this book is making us aware of this voice. He's also going to give us an argument why we should listen to this voice. And the hope is that in reading his book, we become more inclined to reconnect with our true moral nature and balance the voice of instinct with the voice of reason. So he is trying to develop humanity through this book by making us more aware of this part of us, developing our hearing to the voice of reason, and also he will give us an argument why we should listen to this voice. So you see what I'm saying? So he agrees with you, but he's trying to develop us, right, through his book. Does that make sense, Hassan?
Yeah, on an individual level, yeah, that could work, but in a society as a whole, most people will not. There will be a lot of us sociopaths who tend to be the on the sideline, and they have people who simply will not care to want to better themselves in that sense, and will enjoy their own ignorance.
Right. So, I mean, Kant is not against the state. He's just saying the state cannot, it should not be in control of morality. The state can be in control of happiness. We'll talk about that, right? Can be in control of the general well-being. But when it comes to moral choices, the state should not dictate this. This is a great argument against or for the how do you call it, pro-choice movement, right? Because abortion, is it a happiness issue or is it a moral issue? Kant would say the state can legislate when it comes to the well-being of people in the state, but it cannot intervene when it comes to moral choices. This is a whole, right, something to think about. So that's what Kant is saying. Yeah, we need the state to make sure that we have some balance. But morality, we're going to see, has nothing to do with happiness, right? So as we go deeper, you're going to see more clearly, right? Which brings me to my last point, right? Number 3, we saw that Hobbes' morality is there to build happiness. For Kant, no. Morality has nothing to do with happiness. In fact, we're going to find out, and this is going to be a hard pill to swallow for some of you, morality sometimes is going to go against happiness, against either your happiness, even the happiness of others does not come into account when it comes to doing the right thing. There are moments in your life where doing the right thing will go against your own happiness and even the happiness of others. So Kant is saying, anyone doing something moral for the sake of their happiness is not doing something moral. They're just pleasing themselves. True morality is doing the right thing without thinking of the consequences. Let me say that again. Let me write it down. True moral action is doing the right thing without thinking of consequences. That is to say, of happiness. Okay, we're going to see more of that, of course. I'm just throwing these ideas to prepare you for your reading. Okay.
Professor?
Yes, go ahead.
I have a question. So when you said that he said that not to mix the reason with, let's say, brain power and not being something intellectual, so he doesn't believe at all that there's any logic in terms of when you're in a situation not knowing what's right and wrong, there's no logic involved and it's just based on feeling?
Yeah, except it's not a feeling, right? This is it's a voice. Right? When you're thinking about, okay, suppose you're thinking about, hurting someone and a voice comes up, right? It's not like a feeling. Sometimes it's compassion, right? But he's not talking about that. He's talking about, you hear it clearly in your ear, don't do that. And it's not a feeling. Do you see what I'm saying, Zimmerman?
Yeah, I'm just, there's no logic involved at all.
No, it's a voice. I'm sure Kant wouldn't like me to put it like that, but it's the best way I can explain it. You're not doing something in your brain. You're hearing it. Boom, it's obvious, don't do it. You're hearing that voice, right? So, and then you have the brain, calculating stuff, whatever, but you're not calculating when it comes to morality. Your brain is not doing anything. You're hearing, you're sensing, like Löwenthal is saying, it's a kind of intuition, not so much a feeling. Kant doesn't have many feelings, but he has clear intuition. This is wrong. I can't do this. I feel it, kind of. Does that make sense, Zimmerman?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Good. So these are the last bit of terminology, right? We talked about happiness, right? So we know that for Kant, instinct, right, that part of us which is the wolf, which wants immediate gratification, is actually after happiness, right? All that instinct wants is immediate happiness. Whereas reason, right, is after something else altogether, not happiness, right? But what Kant calls the good. Oops, sorry, the good. Right? And this is completely different. So now we have 4 words, 4 concepts from Kant that you will read. We have instinct, reason, happiness, the good. Instinct is after happiness. That's the wolf part. And then we have another part called reason, which is after the good. That's the human, higher part, which is just as natural, right? It's a natural part of us. Okay, any questions?
Hey, Professor, you said reason is to the good, or is it the human, or is it same thing?
Same thing.
Same
So
thing. Okay.
instinct is the wolf part, which wants happiness.
Right.
Reason is the human part, which wants the good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Other questions? No? All right. Good. So let's talk a little bit about reading Kant, because that's going to be a challenge, right? Let me tell you a little bit how I first reacted to Kant. So I never had read Kant before assigning him. Actually, not this book. I had read other stuff, but not this book. And I thought, oh, I should be teaching Kant. I should be teaching this book, The Voice of Reason. And so I hadn't read it, and I had to teach it on a Monday, and I hadn't done anything, and it was Sunday. I was procrastinating. And I started to read the book in the morning. 3 hours later, I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Right? This is so boring. I'm going to die. Right? So I was like already regretting my decision. And then I thought, well, it's a sign. I have to do this. Figure out a way to make this interesting. And I continued reading till the end. And that's when I started to really begin to see the brilliance of Kant, right? So Kant is kind of like entering a desert. At first, it looks like there's nothing. But then as you get accustomed to the desert, you start to notice really interesting details, right? The way the wind has shifted the sand, or some little animals scurrying over here, or the stars in the night, whatever, right? So you start to notice details. And this is how it was. When my eyes got accustomed, when my intellectual eyes got accustomed to Kant, I started to see some of the most progressive, amazing ideas that I had seen in a while, right? So Kant actually seems really like one of those crusty old professors, who have nothing to say to the youth. But actually, when you really push yourself and persevere in the reading, you will notice that, yeah, he has a voice like a horrible, boring person, but his idea is actually quite original, quite brilliant. A lot of genius, actually, in some of these ideas. So I would encourage you, don't get discouraged with the first couple hours or half hour, right? Just press on, give him a chance, right? There is a lot of amazing gems, right? Treasure that we can find in Kant. And of course, we'll explore it together. So try to get, beyond the tone and capture the meaning. Kant is actually not too difficult to understand. It just takes a lot of stamina, because you have to read from beginning to end to really get the idea. He has long sentences, but he's actually trying to be clear, unlike some of the philosophers we'll study later. So, but don't worry, right? If you don't understand anything, it's fine. Again, you just do the reading assignment best you can. It's always okay. No right and wrong. Any questions on anything I've said? All right. Good. Let me stop the recording.